Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Batra Daf Nun Tet. We're going to get started. Quick review of the Mishnah, or the first case of the Mishnah. Marzev doesn't have a chazaka, but yesh l'mkomo chazaka. We have three different interpretations. First one, that it doesn't have in one direction, but it does have in two directions, which we explain as you can move it within a side, but you can't move it to the other side. Talking about the gutter, the pipe that leads out from the gutter. Okay, as opposed to the gutter, which the Mishnah had said, okay, the gutter that's built onto the wall, that's much more permanent, so you can create a chazaka. Okay, so there, you can't move it at all. Rabbi Chanina had said the second interpretation is, if it was long, you could cut it, but you can't remove it entirely, the pipe. As opposed to, again, the mazchila, which you can't shorten it all. And the third interpretation is the marzev, yesh la chazaka, that if you wanted to build underneath it, you could. And therefore it doesn't have a chazaka in that way, but its place has a chazaka, meaning you can't get rid of it. Now, the problem the Gemara is going to raise right now is according to that, so why is a mazchila any different? The mazchila should be the same thing. You also should be able to build underneath it. So that's going to be our question. Tanan, starting from the top of our daf, mazchila yesh la chazaka. The first ones make perfect sense, as I explained, because we can differentiate between something less permanent like a marzev and more permanent like a mazchila. But because it's so high up, so of course you could build underneath it. Same thing with the mazchila, the gutter should be the same exact thing. Shouldn't be a different halacha. So my nafka lemina, right? What's the difference? To which they answer, hacha b'mazchila shel binyan askin. Da'amrle lo nichele detitcha ashita. We could say that we're talking here about a gutter that was built with stones. Okay, that's what they seem to explain as it means of binyan. It was part of the house, the structure, which means that if you start building underneath and you start building a structure underneath and you bang a lot, the banging might break the mazchila. And that's why you have a chazaka on that, meaning you can prevent someone from building underneath it because it might affect it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Now we're going to talk about this marzev. Basically, is this pipe where water is coming down into the chatzar chavero. Okay, so it's coming from my roof into your garden. And I decide I don't want the water dumping out there, and I want to move it to somewhere else. And in the meantime, it's been dumping out on your property. You can say, no way, I want that water coming into my courtyard. And you can say to me, look, Michelle, you acquired the space in my courtyard to dump your water out. Well, in that same way, I also got the water from your roof. Okay, the igra is the roof. I acquired the rights to the water. So since you've been doing this for a while, right, you claim, well, then I have rights to be using your courtyard. But you claim I have rights to be using your water. It's been dumping in my garden for a long time. And basically I can insist, or you can insist as living downstairs, that I don't move my gutter, my pipe, or coming out from the gutter to go somewhere else. You can say, I want the water in my courtyard. Itmar. Now we're going to get to a machloket about this halacha. So Rabbi Yoshaya Amal Ma'akev. Rabbi Yoshaya said, yeah, you can really stop me from moving my pipe and claim you want the water. But Rabbi Chama Amal Eno Ma'akev. Rabbi Chama says, no, it has nothing to do with you, really. You don't create a chazaka in that way. And I can move my pipe as much as I want. Also, Shaila the Rabbi Bisa. Now, they asked Rabbi Bisa, we're going to see in a minute the relationship of all these people. Rabbi Yoshaya is the son of Rabbi Chama, and Rabbi Chama is the son of Rabbi Bisa. So Rabbi Yoshaya disagreed with his father and said, Ma'akev, where his father said, no, you can't prevent me from moving it. Azal Shaila the Rabbi Bisa. Then they asked the grandfather, Amar lehu Ma'akev. And the grandfather said, like the son had said, or he had said, like the son had said. Hari Ale Rami Bar Chama, Rami Bar Chama said about this threesome here, where we have the grandfather saying one thing, the son disagreeing, and the grandson going back to what the grandfather said. Right, this string with three, or this three-part string, where we have this connection of these three people. This connection of these three people, Lobim Harayna take, won't really get severed very easily. Zer Rabbi Yoshai ben Rabbi Chama ben Rabbi Bisa. Here we have these three generations of Torah scholars. Even though they disagree with each other, you see that the tradition is kept, and perhaps what they're saying is, even though the father said something different, the grandson went back and said what the grandfather said, and here we have, look, you studied Torah for generations, the tradition gets protected and passed down. Or perhaps it's just saying, not that he went back to what the grandfather said, perhaps it's just saying, look at these Torah scholars, and they disagree with each other, right? But they all learned Torah, and they were all committed to passing down the tradition, even if sometimes it came out a little bit different. Okay, that was all the first section to finish with the Maschila and the Marzeh. Now we're moving to the Sulam HaMitzri. Sulam HaMitzri ein lo chazakah, according to the Mishnah. Now the Mishnah didn't define what a Sulam Mitzri is. Hechidam is Sulam HaMitzri. This was a less permanent one. You can't create a chazakah of having this in the courtyard. You know, the neighbor could say, hey, get your ladder out of here. Whereas if it was a big one, it was there for a certain period of time, then they could claim, look, it's been here and I can keep it there. Because it was more permanent, you should have protested. So what is a Sulam HaMitzri? How do we differentiate between that and the bigger one? Amrei to Rabbi Yana, kol she'en lo arba'a chavakim. This I mentioned yesterday based on this Gemara. Once it has 4 rungs, it's already big. Any less than 4 rungs, it's small. Chalon HaMitzri ein la chazakah. Now we're going to get to the windows and basically deal with the windows for a while. Ma'ishna gabe sulam delo mefaresh u'ma'ishna gabe chalom de mefaresh. So the first is a very simple question. The Mishnah, the structure of the Mishnah had explained what is a chalon mitzri. Right? It said, kol she'em rosho shel adam yachol likanes letocha. And it said, if your head can't go in it, that's this chalon mitzri. But it didn't define the sulam mitzri. For that, we had to go to the Gemara to explain to us what it was. So why didn't the sulam, they didn't explain it, but when it came to the window, they explained what it is. To which the answer, mishum de kabai ifluge Rabbi Yehuda b'seifa. Well, the only reason why they brought, it's not why didn't they bring the sulam, it's why did they bring the window. And the reason was because they wanted to show Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, who said, even if, right, if it has a frame, even if you can't put your head through it, and even if, right, it defined what a chalon mitzri is, if it has a frame, even if you can't put your head through it, still you can create a chazaka. And because of that, they wanted to define already beforehand, before we got to Rabbi Yehuda, what a chalon mitzri was. Okay, now we get to a machloket between Rabbi Zera and Rabbi Eli. So Amar Rabbi Zera, lemata me'arba amot, yesh lo chazaka v'yachol l'mchol. I'll already preface this by saying there's many different interpretations, whether in general about this Gemara. It's a bit of a tough Gemara to crack. I'm going to go with one kind of approach. Okay, the Bavli's approach and the approach of the Bavli, according to some of the commentaries, is that we're dealing here with we'll see about the problem of the window, of you being able to look out your window and look into your neighbor's property, right? Having a window there. Some people think, again, it's can the neighbor put up a wall? We talked about that already in the Mishnah, that there's different interpretations. There's even a machloket here whether we're going to talk now about under 4 and above 4 cubits, and whether that has to do, whether we're talking about a big window or a small window. We're going to go with it. We're talking about the big window. Okay, with a big window, you can create a chazaka. It's going to depend where. Okay, so again, like I'm telling you that I'm already picking interpretations and I'm narrowing it down, because otherwise we could get all over the place with a million different interpretations, more for a shiur that's a more in-depth shiur, that we analyze the differences between the opinions and what are the strengths and weaknesses. But we'll go with this, okay? And we're going to see that the Gemara is going to bring this to a place, or at least possibly, depending on which commentary you take, that this and some of the other sugyot are going to talk about hezek re'iyah, which we talked again about at the beginning of the Masechet, about people looking into other people's fields, okay, or other people's courtyards or other people's houses. And that seems to be the issue with the window, but it could possibly be a different issue. Again, I'm just mentioning outside of, can a nearby neighbor put up a wall that blocks the light from going into the house? But we'll stick with, like I said, one interpretation. And here goes. Amar Rabbi Zera, lamata me'arba amot yesh lo chazaka v'yachol limchot. Now, assuming we're talking about a chalon mitzri, the big window, if it's under 4 amot, which is again the average height of a person, maybe a little taller, right? 6.4 feet, something like that, around to 7. You can create a chazaka and I can complain, right? Those two things usually, and I say usually because we'll see, usually go hand in hand. If I can complain and protest, then you can create a chazaka if I didn't. That's how it works, right? By the fact that I didn't protest, well, that gives you proof to say, look, I have a chazaka here. So if it's under 4 amot, I can really complain, and therefore you can create a chazaka. So you have a window that's 4 amot off the ground, okay, right, within 4 amot off the ground, and right, presumably the issue is I can complain, you can see into my, right, your window faces my house. That's going to be a lack of privacy for me, and therefore I can complain. But above 4, you can't even see out that window. So if it's above 4, I basically can't really complain about it. And therefore, you don't create a chazaka on it. Because if for whatever reason later I did complain, you can't say, well, it's been here forever. Because I could say, well, I didn't realize it was getting in my way, but now it is, or maybe something like that. We don't really know right now. Rabbi Eli, he disagrees with Rabbi Zera and says, even if it's 4 cubits off the ground, and he says two things that seem to contradict each other. You can't create a chazaka on that window, but I actually can protest it, okay? And even though I can protest, though, I would say it like this, despite the fact that I can protest, you still can't create a chazaka, okay? Which we're going to have to explain. So the question is, the real difference between them is about, can I protest this window or can I not? So lema b'kofina midat stone kabifli. The Gemara is going to suggest something which doesn't make perfect sense, which is why the Gemara is going to reject it, but we'll raise what they're going to suggest first. Kofina midat stone means if I'm doing something that's totally inexplicable, that has nothing to do with me but you, right? I want to stop you from your window, even though it has zero effect on me. Am I allowed to do that? Is that just like the way the Sodomites acted and they did mean things for no reason? And kofina midat stone means we can force you not to behave like that. So Rabbi Zera says, I can't stop you from this window because this window is your window to do. It has nothing to do with me. So Mar Savar Kofin. So Rabbi Zera says, we can stop me from protesting your window. Umar Savar Ein Kofin. And the other opinion, Rabbi Eli says, no. I can protest if I want. Now, it doesn't make so much sense. Why should I be able to protest your window? But I'll give you an example. Okay, when my neighbor went to do construction on their house, and likewise, I did construction at some point, I had to go to the neighbors and have it approved. And they had to come to me and have mine approved. Okay, have theirs approved by me. Now, in those plans, okay, the rules are, and this is very interesting. At the time, I didn't really realize, and it's only now that I see the Gemara that I totally get it. I mean, I probably could have thought about it, but even if I want to move a window, and this is what I didn't really get, if I want to move a window a few inches, I have to get it approved by the municipality, and my neighbor has to sign off on it. I was thinking, well, if I move a window, what's the difference, right? What does this affect my neighbor? But it totally affects your neighbor because it affects where my window faces, and my window faces my neighbor, and perhaps I could see into their house. Now, this might be true with some windows, not all windows. Now, if my neighbor wants to give me problems, then my neighbor can say, hey, I'm not signing on this. No, I don't want your window there. I want it somewhere else, or I don't want, right? So there's all sorts of things that they could sign off on. Now, some of them might be legitimate and some of them might be just vindictive, right? What point do you have a point commenting on that window? Now, by law, they can comment on anything, even if it's on the other side of the house, and there's no bearing on them. So that's really what Rabbi Eli is saying, which is, if they want to, they have a right as a neighbor to complain about it. And Rabbi Zera says, no, they don't. Only if it really affects them. And this doesn't affect them in any way. So that's what we think the machloket is. But then the Gemara rejects it and says, no. Everyone agrees that you can't complain about something that has no bearing on you at all. You can't, that's really just mean and vindictive, and there's no way we allow that. So what's the issue here with this window that's above 4 amot, which we assume has no effect on the neighbor because you can't see into the neighbor's house 4 cubits high? Well, in this case, it's different because you could say, as the neighbor, you theoretically could put your window, you could theoretically put a step stool, climb up on the step stool and look into through that window. So I could say it does affect me. It's not on the opposite side of the house, it's on my side of the house, and you might climb up on a step stool and look into my house. So again, what's the machloket Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Eli? Rabbi Zera says we're not worried about that possibility. And Rabbi Eli says, no, you could say, listen, I'm worried about that possibility. But still, Rabbi Eli says, if I didn't complain, though, you don't create a chazaka on that because I could say I didn't complain because I didn't think to complain. But now all of a sudden I see you doing it. Well, I could complain. and you can't say, well, I've been doing, I had a window here for 3 years and you didn't complain. I could say, I never even thought that, you were going to do that, even though theoretically I could have, but right, according to Rabbi Eli, I could have complained, but I didn't. But now that you're doing it, I see it's an issue. Or maybe one day I realize, maybe someone will do that one day and I don't want it there. So I can always complain, and you can't claim I have chazaka on that window. So now we have this machloka between them, and someone comes before Rabbi Ami with the situation. Shadre the kamed Rabbi Abba bar Mama, and they send him before Rabbi Abba bar Mama, and Amar le Avilei ki Rabbi Eli. Okay, he says we hold like Rabbi Eli, in essence, which basically means the neighbor can complain. I think what happened here was that so someone wanted to do its chalon suri for Amod Hai, and he thought it was okay, and the neighbor was complaining, and he said, well, can I build it anyway? And then basically the pasuk like Rabbi Eli, that no, the neighbor has a right to complain. Okay, next. Amar Shmuel uleora afilu koshu yesh lo chazaka. If your window, though, is a window made for light, as opposed to, let's say you had this window which was really made for possibly looking at fields that were far away or something. But if it's for light, then kol shehu yesh lo chazakat, even the small window, okay, this is back to the little window, that even a small window, if it's meant for light, then you can create a chazaka on that. And in other words, again, number one, the neighbor should have complained because they knew it was for light, so they knew you were going to keep it there permanently. And if they had an issue, they should have complained. And, you can create a chazaka and insist that, keeping this window once it was a fact on the ground. Again, there's a lack of clarity among the commentaries here, whether chazaka is immediate here, chazaka is 3 years. There's a lot of lack of clarity. New Mishnah, Haziz. Haziz is a beam that comes out of a wall. Okay, so you have a shared wall with your neighbor. Let's say it's your neighbor's wall. Okay, let's talk. We're going to see really maybe it's someone in the attic. Okay, they are on the roof, and they have something that juts out from their roof, and it's their wall, but it's over your courtyard. So now the ziz ad tefach yesh lo chazaka. So if it juts out a tefach, then the owner of the roof, if I didn't complain, they can create a chazaka on this and say it's here and you can't get rid of it. Okay, if I want to get rid of it and say, listen, it's in my airspace, I can't do that. V'yacholim chot. But again, they could create a chazaka because theoretically I have the right to complain about it. Once it's a tefach into my space, I can complain. If I didn't complain, again, it's unclear whether we're talking about 3 years or a certain period of time, it's unclear. But if I didn't complain within whatever that time period would be, then you create a fact on the ground and I can complain about it later. But if it's less than a tefach, ein lo chazaka ve'eno yachol limchot. So once it's less than a tefach, now it's unclear who doesn't create a chazaka and who can't complain. So we're going to wait for the Gemara to get to this to give the Gemara's explanation for this. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Meni. We'll get there soon, not yet. But Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Meni. So either Rabbi Asi said the name of Rabbi Meni or Rabbi Yaakov did. Hichzik betefach, hichzik be'arba'ah. Okay, if you have a tefach, then you already have 4 tefachim. That doesn't make any sense. My kamar, the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Amar Abaye hachi kamar. Abaye says, this is what we mean. Hichzik rochav tefach b'meshech arba'ah. Hichzik b'rochav arba'ah. If you had a tefach jutting out, okay, that was 1 tefach wide, but 4 tefachim long, then not only, okay, you're living in you're the owner of the wall or the roof, maybe we're talking about, you have this thing jutting out that's 1 by 4 tefachim. You actually can build it, extend it out to 4 by 4 tefachim. Okay, why is that? A little hard to understand, but if you remember Masechet Shabbat, we talked about something that has like it's a makom. Okay, we learned it in Eruvin, like a 4 tefachim of space is already considered something of seriousness, like it's already something. And because of that, they say if it's already 4 tefachim long, it's as if you have that space that's 4 tefachim wide as well, and therefore it's all considered like one place, one space, and therefore you can actually extend your beam that's coming out to a 4 tefachim of width. Okay, 4 handbreadths of width. Now we get to understand this other line. So Amar Rav Huna, lo shanu ela bal hagag bebal chatzer. Okay, so who can't prevent who from what? So they say the bal hagag, the one upstairs, can't prevent the one from below from one of two things. The person below, okay, has this beam of their neighbor jutting out into their property. Either they could say, hey, it's in my property, I want to hang something on it. And they do that. Often these beams were used for hanging things, maybe something to dry or something there was no space in the house. So since it's in my courtyard airspace, I can go hang something on it if I want. And the person who put it out there can't protest if it's less than a tefach, okay? Once it's a very small size, they can't claim ownership over it, really. So they can't protest me doing that, or they can't protest me cutting it because it's not significant enough, okay? So I can just cut it off if I want to, let's say, put up something there in the space. Aval ba'al hachatzer b'ba'al hagag yachol limchot. But I can protest the user of the roof from using it. Okay, now why? So we're going to see in a minute that it has to do with hezek re'iyah. Because if they use it, what happens? They're going to lean out of their house to hang something on it or to use it in some way. And they're going to be looking out into my courtyard. And that is an invasion of my privacy. Okay, this is at least the way the Gemara here explains it. Okay, in Mishnah Eretz Yisrael, he claimed that perhaps it's something different here, and that the Bavli wants to connect it back to the long sugya we had in the beginning of Hezek Re'iyah, but it's not necessarily the only way to understand this Mishnah. But we're going to go with the Bavli because that's what we're learning, but know that it's possible there's different ways to understand this Mishnah. So now, Rav Yehuda disagrees and says, Rav Yehuda Amar, that was Rav Huna. Rav Yehuda says, Afilu ba'al hachatzer b'ba'al hagag eno yachol limchot. Even the guy below can't protest the guy upstairs using that little, less than a tefach, because it's so insignificant, they can't protest the use of it. So now the question is, what's the machloket? Lema, why don't we suggest behezek re'iyah kamiflageh? And here's where the Gemara connects it with hezek re'iyah. Maybe that's their machloket. Timar savar shmei hezek. Rav Huna says it's hezek. Therefore, I can insist as the person living down below in the courtyard, person who has use of my courtyard, you can't use your ziz sticking out of the roof, your beam, even though it's very small. Well, you can't use it because you'll look out the window and look at me. And Mar Savar, Lav Shmei Hezek. And Rav Yehuda says I can't stop you from using it is because even though it's so small, I still can't stop you from using it because we don't care about Hezek Re'iyah. That's not considered damages. And then that brings us back to the machlokah we saw in the beginning of the Masechah. To which the Gemara says, no, you don't have to understand it that way. You could say like this. Everybody agrees that you can't invade my privacy. What's the issue here? If it's less than a tefach, though, shanehacha, this case is different. To Amrle, the roof owner can say, look, I can't really use this for anything. It's so small. The only possible thing I could use it for would be the only thing I could use is to hang something on it. In other words, I can't use it for, I don't know what exactly you would use it for, but I can't really use it for anything else. But I could hang something on it. Now, if I want to hang something on it, it doesn't mean I'm going to invade your privacy. I'll turn my head away and hang it outside. I won't look out my window. And therefore, there's no hezek re'iyah here. If and the person who says, I can stop you from doing it, the first opinion Rav Huna says, it's very nice, I could say to you, that you claim, I'll just turn my head away, but you know what? People don't always pay attention. And one day you're going to walk out, look, and you'll look at me in my courtyard, and that would be an invasion in my privacy. So that's the case with disease. And now we're going to move on to a new mission. Again, right, presumably relating to privacy issues, although also this is where Mishnah Eretz Yisrael claims that this really perhaps has nothing to do with privacy issues at all. But anyway, we're going to stick with the way the Bavli understands it, that it's privacy related. Lo yiftach adam chalonotav lechatzar hashutafim. If you have windows that go out to a jointly owned courtyard, okay, or you have a house that points toward there, you can't open your windows to this courtyard. Okay, so what's the issue? Again, if we go with hezek re'iyah, it's because my windows will look out on my neighbor, and it'll be all these people in this shared courtyard have a certain level of privacy, and now I'm opening more windows there, people will see. What Safrai suggests in Mishnah Eretz Yisrael is that the issue is that if windows people use not only, right, people use for storing things, and people also use to get in and out sometimes. They use their windows for climbing in and out. And that already, remember we talked about the courtyard, like I'll put things then right outside my window, and then I'll take that space and I'll take up space where it's using space that people in the courtyard wanted to use. So perhaps that's the issue also. But like I said, we're in the Bavli, so we're going to end up reading it with the Bavli, but you should know that the Mishnah could be understood differently. Lakach bayit b'chatzer acher. Let's say I buy a house in a different courtyard where I'm not an owner of the courtyard. but I don't jointly own the courtyard there. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm part of a courtyard somewhere else. Perhaps I have another house there. Perhaps I don't have a house, but I'm just part owner of a courtyard. And then I have a house though that's right near there, backs on it, but doesn't open into the courtyard. So I basically, since I'm a part owner in that courtyard, I want to basically have my house open into that courtyard. Because what's the problem? It's going to create, again, two options. Either it's going to create more people in there, which is less privacy to the people in the courtyard, or it's going to create more traffic, right? If I open it, remember, I also get 4 cubits in front of the courtyard. It's basically taking away space from other members of the courtyard. If I open a second floor, right, I build up. This all goes back to things you have to apply for in the municipality. If I want to build up, right, every house has X amount of building rights. Can't always build another floor, okay? You have to get approval. This also. You can't just build on top of your house. If you do, you can't have it open into this courtyard. Now, again, Safrai claims this is space issue because to get to the Aliyah, you had to put a ladder, and the ladder is on an angle, and it takes up space in the public courtyard. Or perhaps it just means more people in the courtyard, more traffic, less privacy. Ela imrotze, so if you want to do that though, have more people live in your courtyard, in your house, what do? Bonet hacheder lifnimi beito. The pshat sounds like, not the way the Gemara is going to understand it, which we'll get to tomorrow, but the pshat sounds like you can build another house inside your house, which, by the way, you would have to, according to Safrai, you'd have to probably pay the people in the courtyard because you're basically buying more space in the courtyard. And once you did that, at least they were compensated for that. And then boneh aliyah al gabei beito, and then you build the second floor over there, upotcha letoch beito, and they don't have this ladder coming out. They can only go through the house and out through the house. Now, the Gemara is going to understand this differently than I just explained it. So we'll have to see that tomorrow and why this really resolves the issue. Because in the end, you are adding more people to the courtyard. However, if you're not adding another entrance or exit, or you don't have this problem that they have to climb up with the ladder and it's taking away space, seems to be okay. But the Gemara is going to have to ask really, why does this work? Okay, because in the end, you really are still adding more people to the courtyard. Who cares if they go out that way or that way? There's still going to be more traffic and more people. So we'll talk about that soon and what they mean. And the Gemara is going to understand it very differently, that you're not actually allowed to build a new space and more, you don't really get more building rights here, but we'll see what it is exactly. Or building rights of a different nature. It's not like we're giving you more space in the courtyard. Okay, anyway, we'll hold off till tomorrow. So the Gemara now says, why does the Mishnah say you can't open windows to a shared courtyard? Even if you weren't part of that shared courtyard, let's say it was someone else's courtyard, of course you couldn't open windows. So why is it saying specifically to a shared courtyard? To which they answer, lo mabaya kamar. Well, it's a lo mabaya structure, which means lo mabaya, we don't even need to say lechatzer chavero delo. Obviously, you can't open new windows to a shared to a courtyard of other people. You're not even part of that. Aval lechatzer shutafin da amrle sof sof hakabayit it's nui minai b'chatzer. If I'm already a member of the courtyard, say, what do you care if I open windows to this courtyard? I anyway can see into the courtyard and as I can go into the courtyard. So what's the difference if I add windows from my house to the courtyard? Well, kamashmalan, damarle, well, it comes to teach you no, because the people in the courtyard could say like this, until now, when I went into the courtyard, I only had to worry about privacy from you when you were also in the courtyard at the same time. But now I have to worry about you when you're even in my house. So when you're home, you could see into the courtyard now. So basically 24/7, I got to worry, except the hours when you're all out at work, I had to worry that someone's looking at me in the courtyard. Whereas before it was only when you were in the courtyard. I wasn't worried you were going to see me otherwise because there was no window here. Now you're adding a window, and now there's all these other hours where I have to now watch out what I do in the courtyard that you're kind of spying on me. Tanu Rabbanan. There was a case, it's a braita. So there was a case about someone who opened their windows, they opened it. Now we're going to see the commentaries claim, the Rashbam claims that it was a case where the neighbors permitted it, or he claimed that they allowed me to do it. Okay, that it was permission, right? Like I got permission from the municipality, my neighbors all signed off on it. That's what he claimed, but there was no record of this. So now the neighbors start complaining. You have a chazaka here. Your window's there. You get to keep it. They can't stop you. Uba lifnei Rabbi Chia, but then the case came before Rabbi Chia. Apparently they didn't listen. They kept complaining. Amal yagata upatachta yiga ustom. Well, you worked and you opened it. Well, now you'll work and you'll close your window. And he ruled opposite. Why? What's the basis of this different ruling of Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Chia? Good question. The Rashbam claims that chazakta because saralala alter havi chazaka. The Rashbam says, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi said, having a window is an immediate chazaka. If they don't complain immediately, then you have facts on the ground, it's fine. The expectation here is that they would complain immediately. The fact that they didn't, if they complain later, tough luck. And the other opinion, right, Rabbi Chia says, no, and I'm looking at the last words on the daf in the Rashbam, they get 3 years to create a chazaka. As long as they complain before that, you have to get rid of your window. According to the Rashbam, that's the machloket. It's a little weird that would be the machloket, and the Gemara wouldn't say so, because that's, all the main parts of the details are missing, right? So the Ramban and other people say that it's hezek re'iyah, and that the opinion of Rabbi Chia here is that how do we view hezek re'iyah in this case? Is it like the smoke? Remember, we said, if you don't remember, Rabbi Yossi says you have the rights to do what you want in your courtyard, as long as, right, the neighbors could always complain though if it's smoke, because smoke really causes damage to your body. And this also, hezek re'iyah, is a damage to the person, not damage to your property. So that's why Rabbi Chia viewed this, hezek re'iyah is like smoke, and therefore you always have the right to complain. Whereas Rabbi Yishmael, but Rabbi Yossi said, no, this is not like smoke, and only smoke, they should have, they can always reserve the right to complain, but anything else, they could create a chazaka, and then it's a different issue. So there's a debate about what exactly this machloket is. We'll stop here for today. So what do we have? Started with the Matzchila and the 3 interpretations of the Marzev, and the Matzchila only worked with 2 of them, and then we had to explain how it worked with the 3rd interpretation. Then we had this issue of, can you block? What about if the person below wants the water to be coming there and you want to move it to somewhere else? You're allowed to move it, or can they stop you? From there, we got to this, right? And then we got to a machloket about it. And then, right, with the father and the grandson and all that. And then we went back to the Sulam HaMitzri, and we noticed that it was a little, right, some definition of what the Sulam HaMitzri was missing, while the Chalon HaMitzri was there, and then why was one there and one wasn't. And then we really got into this Chalon HaMitzri, the small window, and whether it's, the big window, below or above 4 amot, and this machloket between Rabbi Eli and Rabbi Zera about, can you actually prevent someone from putting a window so high up, or do you have no rights to complain? Either which way, there's no chazaka there, but do you have the rights to complain? Then we moved to the ziz, and then we had 2 interpretations of the last line. If it's less than a tefach, who ein lo chazaka and no yichol limchot. And then we got to the windows in the courtyard and opening different windows in different situations and having more people in the courtyard by building an upstairs and all these situations where you have to get approval. And then what if there's, can they debate, can the neighbors push you out? We ended with a story about, the windows, and can the neighbors, do you create a chazaka at some point on that? And we had this machloket that we ended with a few different interpretations of how to understand the machloket. With that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.